check we're on the right camera. Okay, so this is the scene we're doing. This is a Venice scene, the Grand Canal from the Accademia Bridge. So the reference picture is originally painted by Edward Seago, and it's an oil painting, but I'm going to be painting in a watercolour. The colours I've got here are yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, burnt umber, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, neutral tint, and there's a bit of cadmium red and some white gouache. The paints I tend to use are Rembrandt watercolours, which are artist quality. I would say they're on par with Daniel Smith from the point of view of the amount of pigment in them, but considerably less in price, although Daniel Smith paints are worth the money. They are fantastic as well. But this advert isn't sponsored. This video isn't sponsored, should I say. So I always give the paints a little spray just before I start. But all the paint in here is fresh and it's not dried up. The red's a little bit dried, but so we're painting on an 8 by 10 inch, and I've sketched out my drawing. This is available on my Patreon page, the drawing, but you'll notice it's very loose, that if you have a very tight drawing, your painting will be very tight. So try to keep your pen, when I drew this, I kept the pencil on the paper, kept it very loose. So I need to make a few adjustments painting this in watercolour from when it was painted in oils, that I will go dark with this building as opposed to light. Reason being is I'm going to focus all the light here, so by having this building dark it'll make this appear lighter. So I haven't put a horizon line in because I want to create that atmosphere, paint the sky into the water. I've left out in the drawing about 200 boats, but I will aim to just do a bit of dry brush and then just suggest some of the details. As long as I've got a couple of boats in here with details, the eye will fill the rest of the details in, and obviously we'll have a chance to put some nice reflections in here as well. So let's start painting. So I'll use a Skoda Ultima size 14. So hello Rusty Drover and Ma R, I don't know where you're from, possibly France, maybe Spain. So I need to make sure I keep the sky nice and light, so it's important not to go too dark. So let's just get some colour on here. So I can paint over this building because it's going to be darker over the top of this. So I want to get some warmth into the scene. So I'm going to use a little bit of yellow ochre, but I'm using very watery paint here. So I can paint that up into the sky, get a bit of warmth mixing on the paper. So we can go nice and light, lots of left white paper, leave the white paper behind to add a bit of sparkle. So I can now start to add some blue into this. So that was cerulean blue. So I'm painting wet into wet there, but it's dry down here. So I can go a little bit darker in this foreground. So I'm not worrying about the colours in the reference picture to replicate those. So I'm going to attempt to put some ripples in this water. This is quite a tricky technique, but what you need to do is have thicker paint than you've just put on. So this is quite a bit thicker than I've just laid on the paint there. So it needs to be just damp the paper, so I don't want too much water on here. and then I'm just going to put these marks on, and they'll get smaller as I get further away. And they don't look right at the moment, but once it's dried it should all make sense, hopefully. And with this, you've got one shot at this, that you've got to put them in and then leave them. So that hopefully will give us the illusion of ripples in the water. So I think I shall now let this dry, so then I can paint these buildings onto dry paper. So I'll get, if I try to paint them now, the paper's too damp, they'll just soften and spread out. So I need a hard edge there. So we'll let that dry. What I can do is use my hairdryer to speed things up. So I shall just mute the microphone for a moment. So the paper is now dry, so I shall go to a slightly different brush. This is an Escoda Perla size 12, but it comes to a nice point. So slightly thicker paint than the first wash, but I'll need to keep it fairly thin still because these buildings are quite far away. So a bit of cobalt blue and a bit of burnt umber. So make sure my hand's out of the way so you can see. So the paper is now dry, like I say. So with scenes like Venice, where there's masses of architectural detail, the best way to deal with it is to treat it as a flat shape and try to get a bit of looseness into it. And don't get bogged down with all the details. So I'm just going to use a bit of clean water just to create a little bit of softness there. And I normally have a spray bottle with me nearby, so I can just give it a gentle little spray just to keep this wet, because I want to paint all of this as one shape, but it's all got to be connected. So I hope the internet connection is okay at my end, that I've not done a live video before, so obviously I understand that the quality may not be as good as what I upload, but I'm using Starlink. You know, I'm in rural France where the internet connection isn't brilliant, but so far I've been quite pleased with Starlink. That you can perhaps let me know in the comments whether it's an acceptable quality of video or not. That would be good. So maybe I could start to warm this side up so it adds a bit of interest, but if you notice, there's a little pool of water down here which keeps this alive, so I can paint some details in here and connect it to this shape. So let's mix up a warmer colour. So let's go with some really warm colour, and we can paint this in. This is quite wet here still, so I haven't got to worry about it drying out just yet. And this is how you paint loose watercolours. And you've got to keep the wash alive. So while it's wet like this, I can make these sorts of adjustments. So this is a little bit too orangey, so let's throw some blue on there to cool it down. Brilliant, thank you for the comment about the quality of the film. It puts my mind at rest that I'm not just painting this here and nobody can see what I'm doing. So I've got a pool of water all the way along down here, so now I can use that to mix some darker paint. So I can almost go black, so brown and the blue. So there's lots of little boats along here, so I can just suggest those. Obviously they're tiny far away, so these are just random abstract marks, but because it's quite obviously Venice, or should hopefully be obviously Venice, that everyone will know these are boats. So leave a little bit of white paper, which will help to add a little bit of sparkle. So it's still very wet here, so I can't really add any details on these buildings if I want to, because it'll just fade to nothing. So I've just got to be patient and wait for that. I can add a suggestion of boats here, and don't need to do too many, and that's a chance to connect them to there. We'll put a shadow in there afterwards. Maybe we'll just suggest a little something there. So it'd be quite good to suggest some windows here where it's a little bit closer to us. So although I have neutral tint, which is kind of like a black, I very rarely use it to make a black, but I do sometimes use it. So we can put a dark in there, a suggestion of some windows, maybe another roof there, and by putting these into the buildings while it's wet, it'll give me softness, so it won't detract away from the focal point, but it's enough information to let us know there are windows and all sorts going on here. But it's important not to overwork it, because it is just the backdrop of the painting. It doesn't need too much there. So I think it's going to be a good idea to put a wash in along the bottom here and connect it up to these buildings, but I'll have to paint around these boats because I'll need them to stand out. So I'll use a slightly bigger Escoda brush. So I'll mix a colour for the shadows in the water and the reflections, which this is kind of going to be a bluey orangey painting, I think. So I need to be a little bit thicker with the paint, and I need to be fairly quick because I want to do it while this is still wet. So try to mix up enough to do the whole job. And what I will do first is, because I want this area to be light, I shall just put some clean water here. And I'll paint into that clean water to create a soft edge. So with watercolour, it's all in the planning. So maybe that's just a little bit too blue, so let's put a bit of yellow in that just to So it's wet enough here that I've managed to connect it into there. We can add a bigger boat here. It's just that boat. Some things here. Put that in there. So painting loose watercolours like this, it's all about connection, connecting all your shapes. So let's paint around that boat. I'm going to reload the brush. I had a couple of options. I could have had it lighter the water here, and then I'd have the option to paint the reflections on these boats, but I shall try a different way and just cut around them, and then I can get a dark in here. Didn't mix enough paint. Just using some clean water just to pull some of that across. So it'll all make sense once I get the dark in here, and this will lighten quite a bit as well. So again, I'll use my hairdryer. So again, this is now fully dried. So this shape is basically all of this shape. It's all one shape here. It's all been painted wet into wet, and there's connection throughout the painting here. So I can now put the building in here, which needs to be darker in tone than here, which will bring it forward to us. So darker and a little bit warmer. So let's go for a nice dark bit of paint. So I don't worry too much about the colours, I'm just thinking tonally. So there's all sorts of detail going on here with this building, but I'm just going to suggest a lot of that. Let's just throw a bit of warmth on there. Let's just give it a little spray. So again, I'm looking to get this little pool of water down at the bottom here, and that's what I'm going to use to paint these boats and everything else that's down here. I can connect some boats in the distance there, and got some boats here with the gondolas, shall we say. So these in themselves will make it Venice if you get the shape right, but I'm going to paint them into this building here. And like I did on the other one, I shall suggest some windows and things with some thicker paint because it's quite wet there at the moment. But so we've got windows in here, and you don't have to paint all the windows. That I think this was probably painted actually in Venice originally by Seago, so he had more information there. So I shall have a go at painting around those posts, see if I can make them stand out by being lighter in tone. But if not, I've got the option to make them darker again. I'll give it a go. So got a post there. And I wouldn't be adverse to using a bit of gouache if need be to help suggest them. So again, quite dark down here, and I can paint the reflections of that boat. And just suggest some ripples there. Again, they get further away. So the original ripples I put in, it's a bit big, that one, are just helping it. Let's just lift that one out a bit. You can always put a boat there to hide it. So again, I think it would be a good stage to let this dry. So I can work on this area because this is dry here, so I can put the boats in here and then I can come back to this. So these boats are against quite a dark part of the painting, so if I paint them too dark they'll just disappear. So let's keep them a little bit lighter. And we can add a bit of colour. You can see a bit of blue on that one in the reference. A bit of orange over the top there, so it's nice to put a bit of colour in. So I can put some reflections because at the moment those boats look like they're just stuck on, so they need to be connected to the water. So it's best to put the reflections of the boat in while the boats are wet themselves, and it also gives me a chance to perhaps take care of the shape a little bit. And we've got a figure there. And if they're painted wet into wet like this, they kind of disappear because they're not the centre of focus, but they're there. And figure there. What he needs is I'll let that dry and then I shall sort those figures out afterwards, I think, because they're not quite right, those. But so we've got some other boats here, and because these are quite a long way away, they're just a suggestion. We don't need any details as such. Perhaps have a slightly bigger boat, but these are just marks. And then we can put some verticals in, the posts in the water. So this is sometimes where I'd use a little bit of white gouache, so it's actually dried up in the palette here a little bit, but I could just soften some of those posts while the paper's still wet here a little bit, and just let that do its thing. So again, I shall dry this. Yeah, apologies for the sound. I turned the microphone off to dry it with the hairdryer, but forgot to put it back on. So apologies for that. But basically, I think I was just saying that I wasn't overly happy with the figures, so I've just taken away some of the detail there because I think it was detracting away from the rest of the painting. So all it needs now is just a little bit of colour. So I've got some of this Daniel Smith Pyrrole Red. So this is the stage not to go crazy with putting a load of colour in, but maybe just a little bit here and there. But, you can go a little bit, see, I just don't want too much there. A little bit of orange, just a little bit there. So this is a stage where your mind is saying to you stop, you know, it's finished, but you just want to keep painting. It's just knowing when enough is enough. I know it's not there, but I think it'd be quite good to have something just coming out here, maybe. Just a little bit too tidy, that edge. It's just it's better. So let's take the tape off and let's have a look. So fairly pleased with that. It's kind of what I envisioned, and that's what you've got to try to do when you come to paint a watercolour, is try and see the painting. It'll help you no end if you know what you're aiming for. It's easier to copy another painting than a photograph, because Edward Seago had eliminated a lot of detail in his painting, so I've used that, but I further eliminated detail by just painting this as kind of a silhouette and just a few touches of detail, but it's literally just a mark. You need to have light in a painting, I feel, so I've got the lightest light against the darkest dark here. I made a little bit too much of these boats here, but I've kind of taken a little bit of away. These are just lead-ins, so we've got a path through the painting. All the detail here of all these boats, it looks like there's lots of boats been painted, but I haven't painted. I've painted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 possible boats, but it looks like there's hundreds there, but it's just a little mark on it. So there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed that demonstration. Appreciate the comments, and thank you for watching. I am actually going to do another painting because I've got another demo to do. If you're welcome to stay and watch. So we'll put that one to one side. But I've got this book here, which as I showed at the beginning, if you're new to the video or new to this video, it's a book on Edward Seago's paintings. There are watercolours, but there's a lot of oil paintings in here. And yeah, this is a watercolour that Seago has done, so I shall put that on the screen. Let's just change that over. Bear with me a second. Browse. Okay. So I'm going to have a go at this scene here. So this was originally a watercolour by Seago. Let's get that in place. So this is 7.5 inch by 11 inch. So start with the drawing. So I've got more sky than water in this scene, so I can start with separating the horizon and the water. I'm pressing fairly hard so you can see it in the video, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see it. But obviously I wouldn't suggest you press this hard when you come to do your own paintings. So this is an old canal scene by the looks of it. So it's a black and white photo in the book, so I don't know what colours were used, but in actual fact I quite enjoy having a go at master studies when they're just black and white, because you get a chance to do your own colours. Let's pull that there, that should have been a bit lower down, but not to worry. And that's the key with watercolour, is don't worry about it. So I'm just going to give myself an idea where these reflections are. But, ideally should be moved up higher up really, but let's just go with it. Maybe we'll get away with it. And then this structure here, so this won't be a very long painting I don't think, because there's not a lot in it. So the reflections are mirrored. I won't draw this distant buildings in, because I'll just paint those in. I'll just take again that line out there. So we're ready to start painting. So same colours. So let's use the bigger brush again. Let's just mix all the paint up in the palette. And see what colour that makes. A nice warm grey. Lovely. So plenty of paint at the top. Clean the brush off, because this needs to be light in tone for the distant buildings to show up. And a bit of dry brush, and now I can start to go a little bit darker. And here. So remember, watercolour will dry lighter. I'm just going to lift a little bit of that out. I shall again need to dry this, so I shall mute the microphone, but I'll remember to unmute the microphone. So it's all about tonal value, so I may end up just doing this kind of monochrome. So mix another grey. We'll steer it towards blue. So this needs to be very thin watery paint again, and the paper is dry. So too dark. There we go. So again, this will dry to pretty much nothing. So these are the distant buildings you can see behind the fog. So it's important not to go too dark with this part. And I shall just use clean water to let it fade to nothing down here. And then we've got these chimneys. On there. And you don't have to get this exactly as it is in the reference. I'm sure this landscape changed considerably over the years. So I can just take a clean brush and just maybe soften some of that, just to create a bit more atmosphere. And so I'll just paint that roof just a slight darker tone than the sky, but only just. So again, now I need to let that dry. So now we go slightly darker in tone. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments, and I shall try and answer them as I'm going, or I shall answer them at the end. But anything art related or anything else that is relevant. I'm an artist based in France. So originally from the UK. I have lived in Wales for a few years as well. But really enjoying being in France. I do love to paint outdoors, so it gives me the opportunity that the summers here are pretty good. The weather, it's more reliable than I found in the UK, or particularly in Wales, to be able to set up easel and not have it blown away. So this part is important to retain the bead, and I'm never sure what it's actually called. It's this well of water that collects at the bottom of your wash, that I've got my board at about a 30-degree angle, so all the water is running down, but not at a crazy pace, at a pace that is controllable. So as soon as you get these darks in, it all starts to make sense. But you've got to make sure you reload your brush and keep this wash alive. So this is all still wet here. So I'm mixing on the paper and then take it off the page. So if you don't reload your brush, it's difficult to get this bead of water. So why have the bead of water? Well, it's to use to paint the next bit further down. So we've got these reflections. So the water is obviously very still here because it's pretty much mirrored under there, so you make sure you do get them fairly good. And what I'm going to do, got a natural sponge here which is damp, which I've just wrung the water out of it. Before I do that, I'm just going to mop this up before it becomes an issue. And I'm just going to run this sponge across here. Make sure if you do use your sponge on your paper that you clean it every time you want to reuse it on the paper, because you'll end up with a mess. So I'm just lifting a little bit of paint out, creating that feel of mist on the water. And I find a sponge doesn't damage the paper like a brush can. Let's just give it a spray of water. But yeah, Rusty Drover says leading bead of water is good control. Yeah, that's what it's all about, watercolour. And for me, that's the moment it clicked. That as soon as I started painting with the bead and being aware of it, that's when my watercolours improved. So I shall just use a bit of tissue just to make sure it's dry here, because I need to get a hard edge in there. And Svetlana Markova, welcome. She said she joined just now, unfortunately, but I really like the idea and the result. Thanks a lot. So this video should also be available after I finish, so you should be able to watch it from the beginning. So don't worry about that. What paper do I like? Saunders and Waterford, £140 knot is what I'm using. I have used Archers, perfectly good paper. I used De La Rowley Langford for a long time when I was a beginner. It was an okay paper, but again, switching to Saunders and Waterford 100% cotton was another milestone of improvement with my watercolours. And I would say, if you had to scrimp on anything, the paper would be the last thing. That if you have to perhaps buy less paints and just paint with a few colours, I would do that over not having good quality paper. And I paint on the other side. If I've got a painting that I'm no longer happy with, that I'll just turn it over and just paint on the other side. That it's much the same on both sides. So much thicker here now. So it's all about getting the mixes right. That this is thicker paint than what was here, so I've got to get enough pigment in, particularly on a scene like this where it relies on nice clean washes, that if it's not dark enough here and I've got to go over it again excuse me, it will just lose that fresh painterly look that we're all going for with watercolours. Again, it's best just not to try and replicate everything you see because you lose the freshness. That just don't worry about it. So again, reload that brush, and I've got the bead of water here. So I can now come down and replicate what's here. That I don't normally paint reflections like this where they're kind of mirrored, but this scene I think I can get away with it. And let's bring that up a bit more. And then we've just got a few little lead-ins just to get the eye to move through the painting. Put one there. But I very rarely see Seago actually add birds and things in his skies. I know some people just really don't like it in paintings, but I suppose we all have our different opinions. So there's just a dark in here, but it was painted wet into wet. And it's good doing these master studies because you can kind of learn the techniques they used. So this will just soften to pretty much nothing. So let's just, don't need too many because it'll just add to the calmness of the scene. He says keep putting them in. So could say it's finished there really, that it doesn't need anything else. That I'm tempted to just put a bit of a wash in here. Let's do it. Got nothing to lose. It's just a watercolour painting at the end of the day, and it's all about experimenting. So I think it'll just help connect some of these shapes. Just pull that out. So let's dry this off. So again, let's take the tape off, see the final result. So quite a simple scene, again not a lot of drawing needed, but very effective. That when I turned the page over in the book and saw that scene, I knew instantly I'd like to have a go at that. And it all relies on tonal value. So we've got the lightest tone against the darkest tone here, which really makes this stand out. And then we've got the sense of depth by having the lightest tone, it gets slightly darker, and then darker again. And then by having a slightly darker band at the top and at the very bottom, also aids with the illusion of depth. And it's quite a peaceful scene. There's no figures in there. That if you added some figures in, it would change the feel to the scene. But you could do that. But yeah, no, I really like that that kind of watercolor. So there we go. So thank you everyone who commented and joined in to watch this demonstration. Take a look at my YouTube channel. I've got lots of other videos on there, all painted kind of in this loose way. And also I've got a Patreon page where a lot of my older videos and some of the newer videos are on there. I have an archive section that's got about 80 videos I think on there at the moment. And I'll be doing a Zoom class, which if you go to my website, which is just www.robertmeartist.co.uk, and there's plenty of links in my videos, you can book for a Zoom class there. That I've got one on Saturday, and that's going to be painting 2 scenes, a barn, which will be fairly simple hopefully. Actually I've got some pictures here. So that's going to be the first demo, which hopefully people will be able to follow along. I'll be painting a lot slower to hopefully give people a chance to follow along. So that will be the first scene, and then the second scene will be something more like this. So this is the actual drawing that I've sent for people to use if they want to. Hopefully you could see that. Up a bit higher. Let's just move to this screen so I can see it. So that's the next scene I'm going to do, which will be a bit more involved. So I shall be a bit more in depth on this one. But I shall also go through the process of how it's simplified. So that's on Saturday, and the cost for that workshop is €30, but if you're a patron member, which is currently €3 a month to join, it's half price. So it's well worth looking at that if you're looking at doing a Zoom class. And on this Zoom class I'm actually going to give the final painting to one of the Zoom participants as a bit of a thank you for joining me. And I aim to give a painting to all of my patrons eventually as a thank you. So take a look at that. So again, thanks for joining me, and don't forget to like and the subscribe if you haven't done already, and I'll see you on the next video. So bye for now, and good luck with your painting.